this out for me because I wanted to make sure I had a chance to come back after this last meeting I had with you guys to kind of talk about this final transition. Oh, okay. So the top didn't have that.
Well, we want to make sure, because since we're going to record it, we want people to be able to look at the contract.
Okay, very
But,
good.
yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, I wanted to be able to come back and have one final discussion with everybody about the transition. This is the last piece of the transition tonight. There's a lot of information on this PowerPoint, more than I'm necessarily going to go over, but it was because I knew that Clay was going to probably distribute it, and I wanted to provide a whole lot of information for folks that maybe aren't as aware as some of you about what's been going on. So as most of you know, we are transitioning the River Park CFD from a city-maintained district to a private contractor-maintained district. And we've been moving that direction over the last, I don't know now, 3 or 4 months, I guess. And the last time I was here, we had already transitioned to the softball field maintenance being done by a private contractor, Brightview. And the last big chunk was the actual landscaping of this entire area being moved to private contractor. And so I have gone through that process now, and I want to go over some information with you tonight. And then my hope at the end of this is that I'm able to get some kind of support from the council that I can take back with me to City Council next week on the 23rd. So this first piece is kind of what I've already gone over, but I wanted to give you some information about the types of expenses that were being incurred by this district. City maintained means a lot of different things besides just staff costs. Obviously, those are fully burdened staff costs, but it also involves things like the cell phones that they use, the fleet, the vehicles, the services that they use that involve their day-to-day job, the supplies that they have to purchase, the uniforms. So there's a lot of different parts that go into a city-maintained operation, which is why I felt that it would be more cost beneficial to the district to actually move away from city-maintained and toward private contractor, because you're not having to pay for all those different things. It's all inclusive as part of that package deal with your contractor. So we bid out, and effective February 1st, 2018 is when we are planning to move to this permanent private contractor, and it just happens to be that the lowest bidder was Brightview again. So the same contractor that is doing the softball fields also came in with the lowest on the landscaping bids, which, to be honest, makes sense because they're already here. They apparently do maintenance for the, I'm not sure if it's the HOA or the business side, but they can drop the cost a lot because they're already here. So they don't have to pay as much to continue the operation they're already doing. So let me show you some of the things we changed on the contract, because I think it's important to understand some of the changes the city has been through. The first thing we did was when we bid this out, we pre-qualified, which is not something the city has done previously. Pre-qualified means that we implemented certain metrics and minimum standards that the contractor was required to meet in order to even be able to bid on the job. And the idea behind that is to get the most qualified contractors, legal contractors, right? The types of contractors we want to be able to do business with. So that was the first piece of this. And there were 3 contractors that pre-qualified as part of the process. Then those 3 contractors were invited to bid on the job. All 3 of them bid on the job. The lowest bidder was Brightview. If you're curious who the other 2 were, it was LDI, Landscape Development Inc., and Garcia's Landscape. One, Garcia's was a local Oxnard company, and the other one was a company out of Valencia or Santa Clarita. So as part of the changes, we've rewritten our contract, and it's important to know this because our old contracts didn't allow us to enforce the way we needed to. So if a contractor wasn't meeting our expectations, we didn't have any clauses in there to do anything about it. So for instance, citing them. If they don't do something that they're supposed to do, our inspectors come out and they didn't mow the lawn that week. We had no ability to deduct payment because there was nothing in the contract to allow for that. We also didn't have any clauses for liquidated damages, or if they didn't show up on the job for a certain period of time. There was just nothing in there to really help us do our jobs. We also didn't have any standards in place. And so one of the things I've learned in this job is something called the Green Book. These are standards, they're industry standards that we can utilize for all different parts, not just landscaping. There's pieces in there for all parts of the industry, construction, fencing, the whole bit. So what we did is we took the pieces out of the Green Book that applied to our contract and landscaping, and we implemented those as part of the contract as well. So when they want to do things like stake a tree, for example, there's a Green Book standard for how to do that. So we're no longer trusting our staff to know how to do this. There's an industry standard for how to do this, and And that's how they do it. If they don't do it to that standard, then that's something that we can deduct. So those are the types of things that are in there. So the contract is really thick. It's 120 some pages now because of all the different things we've implemented into the contract to allow us to better enforce and also to have better standards of accountability for our contractors. And talking to the contractors, for the most part, they're used to Greenwood standards. This is something they live by, so it wasn't a big thing for them. They pretty much thought, hey, City of Oxnard, great catching up on this. So it's good that it's in there. The other thing we now have is we do have inspectors that will be on the property. We need to still hire an inspector for River Park, but in the meantime, we're going to be backfilling by using what we've got in the way of staff. But you will have an inspector on the property. The idea will be that they will come behind the contractor within 24 to 48 hours after they've serviced your area, and they'll walk the area, and they'll determine whether they've done all the things they were supposed to do based upon the service level for the district. And I'll show you that document shortly. In addition to that, we have a project manager that we recently hired that will be managing contracts for River Park. They will also be overseeing the inspector. They will not necessarily be 100% dedicated to River Park. I'm not sure yet. I have to figure out how the time's going to work. I want to make sure I don't overcharge you guys for staff. So it doesn't fit that this person needs to be with River Park full time. I'll split their time so I can charge River Park for all that stuff. And then I wanted to go over some of the historical numbers for you so you can kind of see where you've been and where I'm estimating that you're headed right now. So I went back as far as 2007 and really trying to grab all the line items together that I mentioned earlier, all of the different pieces that go into a city maintained area. And so you can kind of see really 2013, 2014, my understanding is that was really when things were humming best out here, things were looking good, there was a lot of staff. And so you can see it was costing a lot of money to have that level of service, 1.6 to 1.8 million. So from what I could tell and from what I heard from the staff, those were essentially the best years. That's what that would look like for River Park to get back to the level it needs to be at. So then I did that versus a comparison, what I'm estimating the transition costs are going to be, what the annual costs are going to look like for River Park now that we're moving to the private contractor. And so I put in a line item for tree trimming, which I actually think that's too high this year, but I'm just trying to go long term, what it might look like. So you can see I've got an annual tree trimming in there. I've got the annual cost for the softball fields, the annual cost for the CFD, landscaping. I threw in some money for other stuff for $75,000 with City Corps. We found that City Corps is a really valuable asset. They're cheap labor, they're great kids, we can mentor and teach them new skills, they can do a lot of this different work for us. And then also another $43,000 for the restrooms. We found that that was something that was very cost prohibitive. We bid out the restrooms as part of the landscape contract in Westport, and it tripled the cost. And so we realized quickly that wasn't going to work. So we talked to City Corps, we talked to them about being able to do that, and we found that they were the best price. So it's been estimated by them it's going to cost $43,000 a year to help us with opening, closing, and cleaning and stacking all the supplies in the restroom. The most unknown, I would say right now, is what we call indirect staff costs. Indirect staff costs are not my time. They're things like the city attorney who reviews your contract, the accounting team that cuts your checks, the city council. What they do is the company comes in and slices and dices those people as a split to all the different areas of the city, and we all end up paying these indirect costs. I don't know what that's going to look like because the way it's been done previously was tied to having a city maintained area, and so that's going to change a little bit. But what I do know is the estimate of the city staff costs, and again, it's just an estimate. I don't know where it's going to land, but I'm estimating about $300,000. So with all that combined together, I'm estimating about $1.2 million a year. And so there is a cost savings. And I think more importantly than cost savings, there is now a minimum standard of service that you guys are going to be receiving, because you're going to be using a professional that knows this business, that knows how to get it done. And if they don't get it done, we're going to be watching them, we're going to fire them and move on to something else. So I think that's probably the biggest benefit, but I also do believe you'll see some cost savings in here. And of course, as we continue to fine tune this process, we'll look at where we can save even more. Okay, so I have copies of this tonight because I didn't know if anybody might want to actually take the copy with them. This is our new service level. It tells you at what level you get what services. And so you all are at level A of service, which is the best level you can have. And this dictates what you get for all of these different areas. So mowing, edging, and trimming, you get that done weekly. Aeration of the property 3 times a year, dethatching annually, overseeding biannually. So this goes all the way down to the different areas on your property. And this is the second page. And again, if anybody wants a copy of it, I do have one sheet on it that I can give you. And a consultant helped us to put this together so we would know how to do this. And they essentially are a company that consults for other cities and other jurisdictions. And so they came up with this metric for us. And this gave us a minimum standard, something that my team actually could look at and say, okay, what am I looking at when I inspect? What is it that they should be doing? I don't know. Oh, they're service level A. Okay, great. Was this supposed to be done this time? Yes, it was. Okay. So what they do then is when that hasn't been done per the standard, they report it. And then at the end of the month, all of the items, if you will, that weren't completed, they sit down with their project manager, we go through the invoice, and we deduct according to what's on the citation form. This is the citation form right here. This tells us what we can charge, and we have to use this. We can't stray from this. So it's basically based on first time warning, and then second occurrence, third occurrence, and if there's a fourth occurrence. And I can tell you that with the last contractor that we worked with under this, he made it to second occurrence and by third requirement because we're not tolerating, and we want to make sure that they understand that we're here to mean business. You can see it's not a whole lot of money, but if you add it all up, and the idea here being that they have budgets and they think they're going to make this money and they want to make sure they're hitting our standards, we found it to be very effective. But this is what our city attorney allowed us. They said this is what was considered to be reasonable for what we can charge. Okay, and so this is a whole lot of information I got from my MPS consultant, and this is definitely more for reading and understanding a little bit about the CFD and the history. I haven't been here that long, so I'm not familiar with how the levies have been handled over the years, but I asked her if she could provide me with some information about how the levy is calculated every year, because you guys do have undeveloped property, which is something that I haven't worked with before. And when the max assessment stops, and at what point is the levy going to reduce, when too much surplus fund balance exists, and all those sorts of questions. And so she gave me some really good information, which you're welcome to read, but basically, the long story short on all of this is that because you're at the point where you're moving towards not having any more undeveloped property, we're getting to a point now where we can stabilize the CFD. We can now start looking proactively at what does this district actually need versus maximum. And so we're in the middle of an RFP right now to hire a consultant to come in and do a reserve study. The other 2 CFTs already have a reserve study. It's a professional that comes in, they look at your assets, they look at your improvements, they look at the entire package of this district and figure out what still needs to be done out here, what do we need to hold out the money for, what assets are there that have the potential to cost money if something goes wrong, how much should the city hold on reserves, and then they give us a number. It's tied to the CPI index, and then that's it, we call it a day. And every year then, I budget according to what I think all these numbers are going to be, and if we save money the year before, we look at the reserve study with the CPI increase, we see how much surplus there is, and then we give it back. It's that simple. We don't just hold money all the time anymore. So this will be a really important study to help us to kind of understand the long term of what road parks are going to look like. And it'll also be an informed discussion between us over the next few years about what do you want to have done. You know, when we talk about the budget every year, what improvements do you want? You know, do you want me to set aside an extra $100K for something that you need? Do you want some, like we were talking about tonight, do you need to do something about the fountain, automate it? These are some of the things we need to look at moving forward so that we can conserve and hold enough money for those projects, but also balance that out with being fiscally responsible and not overcharging your district. So this will be coming. I don't think this will be done this fiscal year. I was hoping, but the RFP process is taking too long. So I think this will probably be something that's done during next fiscal year, which starts July 1st. And the hope will be we'll have that completed and be at a place where we can start having better discussions about the budget for next fiscal year. All right, and so that being said, I didn't bring the contract tonight just because of how big it is, but I am hopeful that your council will provide me with some kind of support tonight so that I can go back to City Council next week and let them know that we've been having these conversations and that you guys do support us moving away from city maintained and towards a private contractor so that when Burkhart will ask me, again, if I've been talking to you, I can tell them that we talked specifically about this item. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, and I also do have my new project manager here tonight, and I have Sergio, who's transitioning back to parks here, that if you guys have any actual maintenance questions or things you're curious about with the train, between the two of them, they can answer those, so.
Let's start with the comment cards, and then,
Actually, somebody wrote that out. You can't read my writing, so it's not gonna.
well, if she can't read the writing, then she'll call it person.
Where's your comment card?
I didn't write one out.
Do you want to speak?
I was gonna ask a quick question, but go ahead. We'll take care of
We'll
the
deal
people
with the
who follow
questions
the
that
rules
she has first, and then we'll circle back.
Yeah, I'm in no
I
problem.
have three sort of easy quick questions.
Okay,
So I did look at the camera.
all right.
And I did notice for the dog park, so we have a sign that says hypothetically it's February 15th, and the contract that says the contract will only take over until April 1st. Is the city going to make up the difference in between?
Yeah, so we had a gap because when we were originally writing the contract, we were told it was going to be April, and then it got pushed to February, so yeah, we're gonna have to fill in just that small gap for those few months. And we haven't decided for sure how we're gonna do it yet, whether it's gonna be city maintaining, or if we're gonna grab somebody to come in as an interim contractor. It's just more about cost at this point, and who we think can do the best job, because it's gonna be pristine at that point. I'd like to keep it that way until we have the contractor on.
Okay. Question number 2, I noticed somewhere in there, the schedule for the bathrooms went to just them opening. Who's going to be responsible for it?
City court.
City Hall?
It was because they come in very early in the morning, so it made sense for them to open them. But for them to stay, close them at night at sundown, they would have to stay later, and it was gonna cost too much. So same with the weekends, they're not typically gonna be there all the time on the weekends, so city court was able to come in and fill the gap.
And then question number 3. I know that I've seen a lot of neighbors talking about when we spray, treat the parks with pesticide, they would like to go to something a little less toxic. Is there a way to arrange that where it's something a little bit more family and pet friendly?
I'm gonna let you guys answer this one. I know we've had conversations about this before. I know that we made some changes, but I'm not as familiar with the pesticides.
We're using what's it called? A natural herbicide that we put together and then spray it for the weeds.
We need to get that out to everybody, because Facebook it bounces around all the
Yeah.
time. It's like, what are we gonna do? And
Wanting to,
what's in our
they've been
package?
signing petitions and wanting to put up signs and everything, so.
We can, and the council can help get that onto the Facebook page to the residents and things if there's information available from you guys.
And you gotta
Because
see specific what it is that you're using.
it seems to be mostly people that aren't familiar with necessarily exactly what is being put out. They just think it's a pesticide, so it's automatically.
And the other thing too, to also think about, a lot of people aren't aware of pesticides in general. We get training regularly on it, and most pesticides are actually very non-toxic. A lot of people don't know that, though. They see pesticide and they think, that it's going to be something, that it's going to, adversely affect them. But most, unless it's like ingested or something along those lines, aren't going to really affect.
Well, I think
anyone
the
per se.
concern is because we see the signs posted in the park,
Right.
and their kids are playing, their
Right.
dogs are walking, and they're licking their paws and things
Right.
like that.
Yeah, I think that's more of a sense of just safe practice. But yeah, no, I get it. It shows skull and crossbones. But yeah. But every pesticide the city uses and exposes people to is a caution label, which is really low toxicity. But it's something that we do just to be proactive. And I know it's kind of scary, but that's just the way the signs show. It shows skull and crossbones. But
Well, and my understanding has been that because of the concerns of River Park, we have moved to
We are
a different
moving.
kind of pesticide than what we used previously, and that although it may not be as effective, that it's because we know about the concerns, we've heard of them, and that's why I know this natural herbicide that we've been using was part of the discussion of let's try something different and see, and if it's not working, and if we need to try something different, I mean, obviously, public safety is important, and it's even the perception of public safety that matters as well.
If someone has a question about that specific topic, who is the right individual for them to speak with?
I think they can call us at Special Districts. Our number is 805-385-7578. That's our main line. And then someone in our office can assist with answering questions.
Clay's question is, do we expect the CFD to inherit additional landscaping areas in the, as we summer?
Come closer to completion of, as River Park approaches completion for development, are we going to inherit any other areas that would be covered in this landscaping, or do we have all the areas we're going to get?
So my understanding is that we have the areas, but they're not necessarily all built out, if you will. So as an example, the nature trail, the walking path, that's not totally done yet. And so there's areas that,
building it in the
right, and so once those pieces are developed and then we take them over, there will be additional landscaping. Yeah.
Okay.
So there will be some areas that, you know, they're in the jurisdiction of the district, but there's nothing to maintain anymore.
Well, I wanted to keep that in mind for what to expect on what we spent on the landscaping costs and stuff.
Yeah. That's why we will be bidding out again at some point, because once we start to, we might not make it till 2020, because if we end up inheriting more property, we can't just make the contractor do it, and it goes against our bid laws. We have to actually rebid.
Okay, the next comment card was me. On City Corp, how are you going to monitor the service levels there? Because they work for the city. It's not, they're not under contract, so.
No, and so each of the city core employees, if you will, they're temp staff, but each of them has a lead supervisor that works with them. So they never go alone, and when they start a new job, they have our staff that's actually going out and training them on how to do those things. And then just like with the bathrooms, that's part of the regular maintenance responsibilities. So our inspectors are going to be maintaining the bathrooms just like everything else, and they'll be treated in the same way. If we see that it's not getting done, we obviously can't deduct them, but we can choose to not use them anymore.
My next question was the trees in the parkways. Currently, Brightview, under the contract with the homeowners association, mows the lawns, but if the trees die, the city replaces the trees. So under this contract that you have, because Brightview will be doing both, but under different contracts. So does that stay the same? The city is responsible for the trees, but not the grass, or how are you gonna?
So typically, the way it works with the trees is that unless the contractor in some way caused those trees to die, and that's within the contract, that, you know, let's say that they didn't water them properly, and they're required to do irrigation checks, and they're required to inform us of issues that exist, that if we feel that it's deemed that they did something wrong or didn't inform us of something, we do have recourse to go after them to replace the tree. But I can tell you from my experience at the city, it's hard to prove. It's been fairly rare that that's happened. And for the most part, we're doing our irrigation checks as well. So a lot of the things that might go wrong because of them would not necessarily be because of them, because we've checked on it. So.
And now it'll be all the same people. So.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned graffiti on a daily basis. Brightview's going to remove graffiti?
So I believe, if I remember correctly in our contract, it's the, do you guys remember, I think it's the license plate size graffiti is included in the contract.
12 by 12, something like that.
And then what we've done is we've partnered with the graffiti action group at the city, who's already out doing it every day, all the time. They have the materials. That for the larger ticket items, we'll have them do it, and then they'll just charge us their hourly cost to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question was the same with the trails, because the trails are still being maintained by Shea currently. But it's my understanding that they're having problems with the trails not being to the standard of the city, so that the trails are too wide or too narrow and they have to be redone and replaced. And
Yeah, and we've actually had problems in some other areas at River Park as well. The way it works is that there's a plant establishment period, if you will. There's a time frame that the developer has to get their act together, and when it comes to things like trees, we actually have out at, I think, Kings Canyon, we have some issues right now where the trees are dying and they're falling over and they've been misplanted. And the city arborist either signs off on that or doesn't sign off on that. And we met with the developer recently and said, we're not going to be signing off on these trees. You're going to have to fix the problem. And what will end up happening is that every time we decline the property, they have to start over again. And there's a new establishment period for them. So the burden is really on the city to make sure that the standards are being met before we accept it. Because once we accept it, that takes the liability away from the contractor, and now we own it. And we is you too, right?
yeah, because I live on a trail, and it's the same problem. They redid the whole thing, but they put in the wrong plants. They don't agree with each other as far as watering is concerned, and some are dying and some are thriving. So it's like, when we get to that point, I hope it's resolved before we're paying.
Right. Well, what I would
maintain.
like to do is maybe have you speak to Joseph about some of this, because with the trees on Kings, that was something that they weren't even at the end of their plant establishment period, but I happened to be out here inspecting and I saw them and I said, why are we waiting? let's inform the developer now, because they want to release it, they want this property released, they want to
Sure
move on
they
to the
do.
next
Sure
thing
they
that
do.
they want to do.
Yeah.
So we met with them ahead of time and said, look, we're not going to accept these, so you can start over now and fix the problem. So if we can address some of this now versus
Because I've been
waiting.
working with the developer as far as the watering and the maintenance
Okay.
but it's this and that, and I'm afraid you're gonna get to the end where you're taking it over and you're gonna have to redo the whole thing, or somebody is, and it just seems kind of silly.
Okay. Well, we haven't even been given the completion.
I know,
We haven't
yeah.
given it yet, so that
It'll
time
be
hasn't
soon,
started,
though,
but it'd be
because
good
they're
to get
almost
proactive and say, okay, this isn't working, this is working.
Would, if you need me.
I think Joseph would appreciate any extra help he can get as
Just
he's
come
getting up to
on.
speed here again.
Come on, Ronnie. Not a problem. Anybody else want to speak?
Alana asked my question for me, and you guys know that we have a very active Facebook community here. So if you guys need something monitored, post pictures or whatever you want to do, believe me, you know, be careful what you ask for. You'll get responses.
Well, I did want to take the opportunity to introduce you to Joseph. He has been with the city for 10 years. He has actually been with River Park since River Park was opened. So he has a lot of history. He started, basically at the bottom, and he's worked his way up to being a project manager, and I'm really excited to have him on the team, and I know that he'll be a valuable resource because he knows a lot of the things that I don't know about the property. And then Sergio, who's been with me for a while now, he's been helping with taking over the crews and really pushing their levels up and getting us in this direction of transition. We were hoping to be able to keep him on the team, but because of union laws and HR stuff, we aren't able to keep him in River Park, so he's going to be transitioning back to Parks in February. But I wanted them both here tonight to, answer any questions you might have, and also just to let you know that you're going to be well cared for. We're disappointed to have Sergio leave, but he's not leaving the city, so he'll still be a resource for us if we need anything.
Sandra, thank you for everything you've done. You just brought some clarity to everything, and I really appreciate it.
Well, we're not done yet. There's a lot
I
of
know.
other things that have to be
Well, you got the
tackled.
city council.
No. And so are there any other questions for Sandra or for anyone else that we have here about this topic?
Can you repeat that phone number you threw out there a minute ago?
Yeah, so our main special districts line is 805, obviously, 385-7578.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. We'll need to, if someone supports it, we'll have to have a second, and then everyone's going to vote yea or nay. That's on the council. It's not a general membership vote, so it's just for the council members. So I'm going to make a motion to support the new contract with Brightview Landscape Services Incorporated in the amount of 1,000.
Yeah, there's a
Oh,
period instead of the comma.
in the amount in the contract as has been provided to the neighborhood council, and that it be supported with a letter to the city council from the neighborhood council.
I'll second that.
All in support, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes, and I'll go ahead and plan on behalf of the neighborhood council drafting a letter, and I'll CC the council members and send that to you, Actually, Sandra, would you prefer that we send it to you or directly to the city council and CC you on it?
I would say send to the council and CC me, and then I'll bring copies with me that night just in
Okay,
case.
and it's scheduled to go to the city council on which day?
23rd.
23rd?
So next
So
week.
you would like it sooner rather than,
That would be nice.
okay.
Before the 23rd would be great.
For the 23rd, try and get it before the end of this week so that
Okay.
they've got time to get it into the board packet.
Well, I appreciate the support, and we'll continue our dialogue over the next few months. I'd like to come back if I can at some point and get an update from you guys on how you're feeling about the transition and if we're moving in the right direction, and then we can start thinking proactively beyond this transition towards some of the other things like Judy and I talked about tonight that we want to work on. There's some other areas like the fountain. There's some improvements, more improvements to be made.
So when you were talking about that levy and, eventually getting our costs down, that means that our Melrose will go down, correct?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Or up.
Or, well,
I would not anticipate that it's going to go up though, because you guys have been max assessed for years, and that's because you build up the surplus fund balance. But what you don't have is the reserve study to back up that total, and once we have that, that gives us a benchmark to start from. And then each year, it'll go up or down based upon that reserve. And so with the other CFDs, that's exactly how we handle it. Every year, we take the CPI increase, We multiply it out, we figure out what it should be, we compare where the budget sat versus where it should be, and then we either charge more or less.
Have you ever charged more in
Oh, yeah.
the CFD? Oh, man.
We've had to, but to be honest, I think that it has to do with your budgeting practice, and when you under budget, it hurts later.
Yeah.
So being as precise as you can, knowing the numbers, being able to forecast appropriately with the things that need to be done, and that's why when we talk about improvements, we need to think about fences and how long will they last and what is the cost to replace, and forecasting out over a period of time and making sure we have the resources versus hitting you guys hard for something 1 year. So that's my plan anyways, and that's what I've been doing since I got here, is looking at what are the capital improvement projects, how long do they last for, how much do they cost approximately, and how much do we need per year to conserve in order to pay for those things so that we don't end up hitting you guys hard 1 year for something.
Appreciate that.
Well, thank you, I appreciate the support.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me. And I don't know who's next, but